We continue this conversation and unpack just that speech, the swearing in of Donald Trump, as well as that speech post the swearing in. We're joined by Professor Brooks Spector. Professor, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Firstly, your reaction to that address by Donald Trump.
Well, my reaction I'm almost tempted to say stunned horror. But in real terms, it was not an inaugural address. It was his campaign speech, simply redone with a new tail and a new head on it. But it was basically much of the same things that he has been saying for months upon months upon months, all the same old tired tropes and all the same promises. Very few of them are going to be enacted or affected. But the tone of the speech, even though the presidential transfer of power was unexceptionable, as opposed to 4 years ago, when there was a near riot on the Capitol building that almost prevented Joe Biden from being certified as having been elected, or urged on by Donald Trump. This time around, the transfer of power was unexceptionable, but the tone and the tenor of the speech was not. There was castigation of his enemies. There were all of these throwaway line, his strongest supporters. There were promises that are almost impossible to keep. And then there were these strange things about the Panama Canal. We're going to take it back because it's ours. Some of your other correspondents have already talked about the severity of there are only two genders, male and female, and that's how it's going to be. I'm a president, I'm going to be a peacemaker, but we're going to do the following violent things to make that true. You have to wonder who in the world wrote this speech and what was intended by the way it was written.
Starting off with just that aspect of declaring a national emergency on the US-Mexico border, also getting a standing ovation on that one.
Well, part of the problem, of course, is that the border crossing by, depending on whether you call them undocumented aliens or illegal immigrants, you get your choice on that, it's actually lower now than it has been for years. Partly a function of better enforcement and partly a function of better economic circumstances in some of the countries from which these people come from. But all of these, every single thing in this speech harkened back to one or another elements of his basic campaign stump speech. Immigration is evil and we're going to stop it. Inflation is terrible, it's crushing the country. The Chinese are trying to destroy us and there's crime everywhere. And all those points were integrated well in his campaign. But that's not what you do at an inaugural address. You're speaking to your party, you're speaking to the nation as a whole, including those people who didn't vote for you, but you're also speaking to the world. And this was not a speech that spoke to any of those groups other than his hardcore supporters. And for that, it's a terrible missed opportunity.
When you say speaking to the world, there was that point that was noted that perhaps it was more inward looking because you're looking to tax and have all these tariffs for foreign nations, all in the interest or in the benefit of Americans. I mean, that type of a tone would certainly be off-putting to many.
Well, I mean, we don't have time to unravel the whole issue of tariffs, but his statements so far on tariffs are the subject of a misapprehension of things, shall we say. A tariff is not a tax on a foreign country or a foreign product. It's a tax on the goods and services once they are on American soil. Then they are folded into the price that the consumer pays for those goods and services. And so one of the key tenets of the Trump presidency is I'm going to bring prices back down, when in fact, if tariffs exist in the way he envisions them, it may well drive prices significantly higher. It may well push the US and China directly into a trade war. It may in fact exacerbate trade relations with the countries two big neighbors and among the largest trade, among the two countries that have major trade relations with the United States, Mexico and Canada. I don't quite understand why he has resurrected the ghost of William McKinley, a 19th century president. At that time, there was no income tax. Basically, the only way the federal government raised revenue was the sale of government-owned land or tariffs. And tariffs now make a much smaller portion, and income taxes on companies and individuals make a much larger portion of federal tax revenues. I'm sure he understands that, but he is using this as a method of raising the temperature. And all of these things, I mean, the Gulf of America is silly. There's no way, there's no power in the presidency of the United States to suddenly change all the maps and the globes and the atlases of the world to suddenly say Gulf of America as opposed to Gulf of Mexico.
No, certainly his speech is one that will be analyzed for days to come. But it seemed there was also a hint of inclusivity there when he was thanking the Black and Hispanic community for their vote and going on to say that in honor of Martin Luther King, he will make sure that Martin Luther King's dream is realized, although not expanding what exactly it means by his dream will be realized. What did you make of that?
I have absolutely no idea what he meant. I mean, I was taking careful notes to all this. I listened to every single word, and I have no clue what he means by that. If for no other reason that he can't claim that a majority of African Americans or Hispanic Americans voted for him. It's not true. A slight majority of African American men and a slight majority of Hispanic American men appear to have voted for him, but the reverse is true for women. And so to claim that that was a major portion of his mandate and his support base is a little disingenuous. I just want to note one other thing in the speech, which I found fascinating. As he was building up a sort of a ritual peroration, he said, and we're going to go to Mars. And then the television cameras all flipped over to who else but Elon Musk, who had a smile that started in his left ear and ended up in his right ear, because that's one of Elon Musk's big ideas, that we have to colonize Mars because we may have destroyed the Earth. This speech, I just want to know who wrote this speech, because I would love to know what it was that was their plan, besides irritating the life out of people who didn't vote for him and getting people in various parts of the world deeply unnerved by who or what is going to happen as a result of Donald Trump's incoming administration. I mean, it is a mystery. I'm just, I'm sorry, I keep saying that over and over again, but it confuses me greatly. And I've listened to inaugural addresses since the first one I can remember is 1960, so that goes back a few years. And this was the first one that I can say confidently is not going to go down in history as an example of superior rhetorical skill.
Professor, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That is Professor Brooks Spector just giving us his analysis post that inaugural speech, which he says was very little of an inaugural speech. More news on the other side by Donald Trump, I must add. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us.